The Thursday, March 20th regular school board meeting to order. Please join us as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Member Clerk, will you please take the roll call of attendance?
Sure. Okay, Member Rebeline?
Here.
Member Corcoran? Not here. Member Haglund? Not here. Member Antonsen is here. Member Castle?
Here.
Member Christensen?
Here.
And Member Tyson? Here.
All right, with a quorum present, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second?
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to scheduled and unscheduled visitors. We do have one green card. It's kind of another exception, but it is our liaison from the Forest Lake City Council. So I'd like to ask Kevin Miller.
Good morning, school board, or good evening, school board members. My name is Kevin Miller, and I am the newest city council member. I was appointed this year. There was a vacancy when the mayor was elected, and he vacated his spot and went through a long interview process and narrowed it down, and I won the spot for the newest city council spot. So they have asked me to become the liaison for you guys to our city council. And I want to just introduce myself. I've been on planning for Forest Lake City Council, or for the Forest Lake City for the last 14 years. And now I'm on City Council, and now your new liaison. So if there's anything that I can do to help you guys, I just wanted to introduce myself and let you know that I'm here to help.
Thank you for coming this evening, and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to reports. We'll start with 916. That one is mine. Short report this month, but we had a presentation last month on least restrictive environment, and especially for those of you new to the board, least restrictive environment is a pretty important piece of special education. So if you haven't looked into that yet, I would encourage you to work with our special education staff to get an oversight on that. Other things that we did is we went through the normal policy approval, many of the same policies we've talked about here for our local district. We also had a presentation on the FY26 budget adjustments, or budget assumptions, I'm sorry. So they spoke to the different assumptions that are being put into the budget for next year, like the number of students, the types of revenues, the different special programs and stuff that they were working on, but they're just getting underway with that work. We also approved the 25-26 school calendars that we spoke about last month, including the stretch calendar. So that should be really interesting to see how that works. And then we had two major contracts that we approved. One of them with Collaborative Student Transportation in Minnesota. That contract is for transportation services for 916 students, in between programs, work experience sites, field trips, that type of thing. And then we looked at a delayed egress and fire alarm project at Bel Air Education Center. And what that's going to do is it's going to provide a delayed egress in some of the buildings. So it'll still be up to fire code. People will be able to come and go in emergency situations, but it will give a little bit more security to keeping students in the building and in the areas of the building where they need to be. Set off proper alarms, notify staff if somebody is leaving the building at a given time. So that concludes my report for 916. Which brings us to buildings and grounds. Who is presenting? Chrissy.
Thank you. Good evening, board. This evening we talked about the Columbus Well. Then we went on to talk about the Education Center bid that you awarded at your last meeting and the upcoming LTFM bond sales that will be happening in the next couple months, and just talked about the timeline for that and when we will be bringing that to the school board.
All right, any questions on buildings and grounds? All right, seeing none, we'll go back to Director Renberg for finance.
Perfect. So finance tonight, we started with Jackie Hegel from LB Carlson, our audit firm, and she did a revenue review for the year for FY25. After that, we talked about our self-insurance bid tabulation, went over each one of the companies that bid, and then talked about a possible selection on that. And again, that will come before the board next month.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll go to communications. Director McKenna?
Tonight at Communications, we talked about print media and communications, and we have this Excellence Beyond Expectation flyer, the brochure that's been out for quite some time, and the need to redo this. One part with the reimagine and some of the reshaping of our school district that we'll have coming down the road here in the coming year, and in part because updating photos is always important to do when you have print materials out in the community. We also talked about some videos that are in production to highlight and showcase our district. There's really going to be 3 points of focus for those: early literacy, performing arts, and career and tech ed. So we're working with Lake Area TV to put those. They're in process right now. The timeline for release is to be determined, but the theme for all of those is amazing. So there'll be video opportunities for us to have on our website, Lake Area TV, our social media outlets, to showcase how great we are, especially in those 3 areas. And then the last thing we talked about tonight was a first look at the community ed catalog for spring summer. That's will be in mailboxes very, very soon and is out on the website.
That's exciting. Any questions?
So on not today's bills to be paid, but last week there was a $9,800 for digital billboard advertisement. What was that?
I don't know.
Probably the positive community wars, right?
So that's most likely, I'm thinking of the billboard at 97, actually, what's that, not 97, but the exit just north of that.
Yeah.
There's a billboard, a digital billboard. We had Positive Community Norms. That's a grant that provides revenue for the messaging that was posted there. I also saw several messages from our athletic program advertising basketball games, and that would be an expenditure funded by the booster clubs to put those messages out there.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll go to Director Jacobson with curriculum.
Good evening, members of the board. This evening we had 2 guest speakers to the Curriculum Instruction and Equity Committee. That the first being a report from the middle school. Assistant Principal Sam Van Hefty joined us to talk through all of the work that they have underway, transitioning from our 7th, 8th grade middle school to a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade middle school. Back in October, the board voted for us to really get started into the work. I wouldn't even say get started, but continue in the work and planning for that transition. And so he gave us an update on how that work has gone, bringing 6th grade teachers into the work, and they have really made a lot of progress in getting ready for 6th graders to join a 6-8 middle school in the fall. Since that time, we have registered all 7th and 8th graders, next year 7th and 8th graders, for their courses for next year. We've met with families to learn about the new middle school model, and being met with a lot of excitement around that. And one of the things that they're now working on is how do we continue to find ways to transition 2 grade levels into the middle school next year. And they don't have a final plan on that, but I think that they're getting real close to that. So they came and presented, and then we heard an update on our the progress that we've made on the professional development components of the READ Act. If we can recall, we've had teachers go through letters training for a number of years, and now we're bringing all of our K through 3 and other teachers through letters training. And we had looked at some really interesting statistics on how our teachers are doing in the post-assessments related to that, and really our teachers are doing a really fine job in there. And then we dug into a little bit of what the training actually shows teachers to do from a best practice standpoint. So we had a little fun with that. across the committee as well.
Great. How did the committee members do with the training?
I think Member Castle and Member Tyson did a fantastic job. Yeah.
Well, great. Does anybody have any questions?
I have something to add because the numbers are so impressive. We have, Katie Lorenz reported that we have over 170 educators in the process of the science of reading, which is a lot. That's very impressive. I'm very proud of that number. And then also, we learned that 435 sixth grade students are currently registered. So
As of this morning.
As of this morning.
Yep.
So,
Maybe
thanks,
436
Rob.
by now, so it just is kind of a changing number, but yeah.
So we're excited for that.
We are.
We talked about there's a lot of excitement around that process and what's going on, so. Great reports by both.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Member Castle.
And we are ahead of the curve of where they would like us to be in that program.
In the READ Act training?
Yes.
Yes, we are ahead of the curve, and as I mentioned, teachers are really leaning into the training and getting a lot from it, probably more than most school districts could expect. I think we've got a lot of really good sentiment around letters training, just because we've got a long history here. It's newer to some districts. It hasn't been so much for us. So I think people are really, really buying it.
Can I ask one thing?
Yeah, Member Anderson.
Thank you. So, if I remember correctly, and I think you might have just said it, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding right. We're now moving all the younger, earlier ed teachers into this training, or they're already in it. Because it was strictly special ed to begin with, was it?
Yeah. So our history goes back as far as 2018, where we were able to offer the training, and because we had literacy coaches, we could facilitate our own training internally, and then teachers who had time, and because some teachers have families and other things going on, it just wasn't the time for them, and others jumped on board. We were training essentially all educators K-6 at that time if they had an interest, and some middle level or secondary special education teachers. And we've done that over a span of about 6 or 7 years. This year, the state has required that all educators in grades K through 3, or EL teachers working with students in K through 3, or special educators working in students K through 3 needed to receive that training. So we had to create a plan that honored and all the people who had previously done it or were in the midst of previously doing that training, and create something unique to them, and then continue to onboard the rest that were coming onto it for the first time. And then the concept would be to continue that training next year, because the program that we selected is a 2-year program. And then starting the fall of 2026, can finish out the educators for phase 2.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? All right, Director Friedman with policy.
Good evening, members of the board. Policy tonight, we talked about 3 of our policies. We talked about adding or updating some definition elements in the harassment and violence policy. We talked about some changes that are very statute-driven for the school-sponsored student publications and activities policy. And we also had a healthy discussion around our credit for learning policy that deals largely with how the district provides credit to students who are coming to us during the midst of their study. So I had a lot of interesting discussion around that. Thank you.
All right, any questions? All right, seeing none, that'll bring us to Dr. Massey, staff welfare.
We covered a number of topics tonight, first of which was an update on enrollment. Enrollment is looking better than we budgeted for and anticipated. That will have an impact on our budget development and right sizing, a topic we also spent some time on. As we begin to shape the budget for the next school year, we look at enrollment, we look at other right sizing due to enrollment, and we're beginning to hold together that process. We also spent some time talking about our elementary boundary adjustment work. We now have 7 different iterations of adjusting boundaries, each one bringing us closer to a plan that we think is going to serve the district well for the next 5, 7, 10 years. We've had our parent community and staff input team meeting on March 10th, and the next meeting is scheduled next Tuesday with that team, gathering their input. And again, I think we're getting close to a plan that we'll be able to bring to the board on at the first meeting in March 1st, I believe, is that scheduled board meeting. We also talked about thank you. We also talked about the 25-26 calendar that has a couple of things that need adjustment. One of which is, we talked about the READ Act training just a moment ago. There's a significant commitment of professional development time to fit all of the READ Act training into the calendar year. 2 years ago, the state gave accommodations and relief on the number of required school days to account for that training. We don't need nearly the amount of extra days that the state provided, but we do need to convert one instructional day at the elementary to a professional development day. Next year, we did that this year. It served our system really well, and we'll be bringing that calendar adjustment recommendation to the next meeting in April. Another component of the calendar conversation was related to the fact that we'll be onboarding 6th grade and 7th grade next year at the middle school. You know that for the last number of years, we've brought our new student group into the school alone for their own day of orientation before the full student body would start. We'll need to accommodate both 6th grade and 7th grade. We'll bring that recommendation in April as well. Additionally, we began conversation around the 26-27 calendar year, which has Labor Day as late as it possibly can be at the start of September, which then would push graduation into the second week of June. So it's a very unique calendar in that regard, and there's consideration for whether or not we should move the start of the school year before Labor Day, still in September, but before Labor Day. And lastly, we talked about strategic planning. Our current strategic plan, as you know, expires in 2025, the year we're in, and we'll need to relaunch an effort to update our current strategic plan, make adjustments to that plan, and we're beginning conversation to begin that process. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Well, first, would anybody like to pull anything from the consent agenda? All right.
No,
seeing-
I'm sorry. Excuse me. Was that the superintendent's report or was that the staff welfare?
That's staff welfare. There is not a superintendent's
That was
report.
adjusted out.
Oh, excuse
Yeah.
me. Sorry, I'm looking at excuse me.
So
Go
I
ahead.
had it on
Sorry.
there too. Good question.
Okay, quite all right.
Sorry.
So we'll go back and we'll ask, does anybody want to pull any of the items from the consent agenda this evening?
No.
Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve it.
Move to approve?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, that carries. We have no action items. Brings us straight to new business, where we have the last 4 of the 1200 series policies to discuss. So we can jump right into 1211. Just getting it loaded up. Okay, so 1211 is the criminal or civil action against school board member. This was largely an MSBA policy. I did notice Donna had some notes here where this would replace 112. Let's see. 282. Did anybody have any specific items they wanted to discuss on this policy? Or do we want to move to 1212?
excuse me, I think
Oh, yeah,
Director
Christensen.
Director Friedman had a point on 1211 4A, is that right? Provisions are not found within the MSBA model. Terms here, she just had some comments here. I don't believe it is necessary to include the terms of the current policy if it is replaced with this prospective policy. As the terms are likely duplicative, she's saying, under 4A.
Where am I looking here?
The green part on
4A.
the
12,
section here.
11.
1211 4A, is that right?
Oh, that entire section.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Friedman.
4A, what's in there right now is
Yeah.
a reprint of our existing policy. But the existing policy largely centers around really a civil sort of approach. So the civil actions is in 3. And adding it to 4 in the criminal charges or conduct, what I'm suggesting is, yes, I know that that this is our current, but I think that if you wanted to just replace it with the model, that's probably the thing to do. And if you want to retain the current thing, that's fine too. Pick the whole thing up, plunk it under 3.
Okay. Okay, now I'm understanding.
Yeah.
I was reading the comments and I was a little confused there myself, so thank you for the clarification. I'll make a note to do that. Okay, any other questions?
I have a question.
Tyson?
So where does this wording come from? I just was reviewing other school
Oh,
district
4A?
policies, and I noticed that several of them do not include this.
Yeah, that came out of
this.
our
112.
existing policy,
Like
112.
112?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it makes sense to do what Donna said, to put it over into 3 then.
Yep.
Okay.
Then that was definitely an oversight on my part. So I can move that
Perfect.
entire section, I can drop it into section 3, re-letter the
Great, thank you.
sections under section 4. And yes, that is a much more appropriate place for that. I missed that. All right, any other questions, comments on 1211, or should we go to 1212? Member Castle?
The only thing I would say is that it looks like there's only one place where, like with respect to the board members and school district administrators, where they have acted in good faith. And in previous paragraphs, it doesn't look like it only applies to their work at the school district. So I don't know if that one place is sufficient, or having it, that same language in other paragraphs, so it's known that the school's not going to cover something that doesn't apply to their work at the district.
And you're referring to 4A, that same section?
It was in 4A3. So that's the only place I'm seeing where it indicates that their behavior would have to do with their school actions as opposed to.
You'll see that covered
Anything
in
else?
section 2, item C as well. Points out under the,
Oh,
with connection to performance of school district duties.
Yes.
yeah, thank you, Dr. Massey. That would be sufficient to apply to the entire policy below that. So I think that covers the concern there.
All right.
All right, great. We'll move to 1212, school board member development. Again, this largely mirrors MSBA Model 212 and incorporates Forest Lake policy and practice. Policy 111. marked in green. I should pull up the differences here. Did anybody have anything to discuss on this policy specifically?
So I was curious, just thinking that, looking over this, the general statement of policy in 2, that 3, 4, and 5 under A, would it make sense to just combine that into more of a fluid sentence?
Or rather than having them be
Having
separate?
them kind of listed out individually?
That's funny because I was reading over some policies earlier and I was like, oh, I wish they were separated out so I could read it more easily, the different items. And not necessarily this one, just policy in general. I mean, I like how it's separated out.
You prefer it broken out? I'm indifferent, really, to be honest. I just like that they're in there. And like Director Friedman mentioned, this fits our standard practice.
Okay. And I just thought 5, be supplied with material pertinent to meetings and have its use shall be explained. I thought that's kind of subjective, but, I mean.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that was more getting into and making sure that we, especially new members, understood board book.
Oh, okay.
Which was really
Want
kinda
to
what-
refer
Yeah,
to
so-
board book then?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's standard practice, things that we do, just kind of detailed out. Should we clarify that, or, I didn't want to get specific
Right.
and spell out board book because if something changes.
Yeah, that's
Could
a
you-
tool to accomplish that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Member Tyson. Maybe we could, it does seem really general because again, maybe I might think material is pertinent and I wasn't provided it, or you might
Right.
think, so, but I get what you're saying. You need to understand. So could there be something like be supplied with the tool, what do you, I don't know, I don't know the word I want to use.
My thoughts today were, and I know this is, multiple meetings in, but I was like, maybe I should just make an appointment with Joy, so because, I'm not a techie person, so when I pull my thing up and just sort of leave it like it is, I don't try to rearrange things, and I need maybe a little bit of help to, let's navigate this and see how I can move it around and make it more easily readable. I don't know. So, I mean, I think actually with the board book, somebody, like a half-hour time, if we need to delineate it and be specific, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Maybe you could say be supplied with training material, or like some word of training to use the common software. I mean, you wouldn't say that, but however you say that, because to me, be supplied with materials pertinent. That could be paper, that could be, so, but I appreciate, Member Chair, how you said it is pertinent to the online tools we use. So whatever words make that sound best, I think we should say that.
Trying to remember specifically what MSBA had, but I don't, oh, here it is.
Or maybe Director Friedman would have a suggestion.
This might be lifted out of our
Yeah, that's a good idea.
current policy. Policy 111, let me look at that quick too. We're getting to the point in a lot of these policies where I wrote them several months ago and I've tried not to edit them.
Yeah.
So now I'm trying to remember where things came from, orientation of new board members. Believe it or not, that was almost a copy and paste out of our current board policy that states the electees shall be supplied with material pertinent to meetings, and its use shall be explained.
It's probably just so different everywhere.
Yeah.
No, it's,
But,
it,
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
it's
And
it's
it's
a
kind of
relevant.
discretionary, right?
Yeah, it's a
Who
relevant
needs what.
discussion topic here on, is that really the best wording? Is that the best way to go after that?
I would like to see some different wording.
I would too.
I did make a note to say wordsmith this,
Yeah.
materials, training, et cetera.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so that's where that one came from.
Oh,
Okay, can I go back to 3 and 4?
Sure.
The possibility of combining them, I just look at that differently, like it's kind of redundant, and I don't know if that was a cut and paste.
Let's find out.
Yeah,
I have it up and running.
let me know.
Well, they both kind of happened at the same time when we went through the tours.
Yeah.
They pretty much,
Mhm.
Yeah, that was like the
you know,
orientation
discussed the
day.
Orientation day,
responsibilities
we
of the
could-
administrators, of
And
those
it's-
administrators. There's many other
Yeah,
administrators
there
we
was-
may not have talked to, but, so there's like the IT, I don't remember talking to that administrator. But, you know, I've went in there with, oh, here's the issue with this device here.
So number 3 was essentially a copy paste. I
Okay.
did add within 180 days of taking office, just to kind of time box that a little bit. 180 days seems like a really long time to me, especially since I know I covered my orientation prior to taking office. I know new members did as well. So I was trying to be very accommodating there. The be invited to tour district facilities with the superintendent and meet with faculty leadership, that was not in our current policy. So that was either an ad or that came out of a MSBA policy. Again, that follows our current practice, and I saw a lot of value in it. So I felt it was worth including in here. I did not time box that, you'll notice. We certainly could add that because it would really be, we could change section 3 to be invited to meet with superintendent of schools, other administrative personnel, to discuss the responsibilities of those administrators and to tour district facilities.
Yeah, I think that would
I
be.
think that sounds more fluid,
And then you have a time
time
stamp
on
there
it
too.
for
Mhm.
both.
Would we want to use the orientation wording in there? Because that's where it happened with us, so.
Yeah, we did that as part of orientation.
So perhaps it should say as part of orientation, and then it would happen right away instead of 180 days later.
Mhm.
Maybe a refresh in 180 days.
Well, and I will say that during the MSBA trainings that I've done, not all districts do what ours does. And I thought all of it was very helpful.
I don't want to muddy the waters, but you guys are elected in November. You take your seat in January. There's 6 weeks as you're preparing to take your seat. It's a time crunch, but there's an opportunity there to tour buildings, go through the orientation that we provided prior to taking your seat. I think there's great value in getting that taken care of before you sit here at the table.
Yes.
So if you're looking at a time-bound concept, you might want to make the suggestion of prior to
Yes.
Yeah.
taking seat.
The orientation
Yep.
portion.
Yeah,
prior.
I would agree.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that
It's-
worked out real well.
And in the past, I think some people have done that. Gone that route of doing it prior,
Yeah.
or they'll do it as
Yeah.
soon as they're elected, go. So,
Do we want to codify that in policy, though? So the within 180 days of taking office, that time box that I put in there, I put that in there based on Minnesota State Statute 127A-19, which points back to the being offered training in school finance and management. So I just kind of carried that down and said, yeah, you should get familiar with the school as well. I agree there's incredible value to doing it prior to taking office. But do we want to codify it in the policy that we do it prior to taking office or not?
That's the prerogative of the board, in my view. It doesn't restrict admin from providing that orientation if you put 180 days on it.
Yeah.
How we practice that can be different than what you have in policy,
right.
provided it meets the 180 days.
Yep. Yeah, which is why I tried to be kind of open with this,
Sure.
just to be more accommodating to staff and to potential board members, and it's an opportunity. Please take it before you take office, but.
Yep. And Mr. Chair, related to item 2 there, 2A2,
Yes.
you've got the language there, offered training in school finance. The statute
Yes.
that's referenced in policy actually uses a much stronger concept there. It's stating a member shall receive training in school finance and management. It doesn't make it optional, the statute. And as much as orientation to the district is extremely valuable, I think getting the financial training and management is really critical to your function as a board member.
For sure.
So I would
Agree.
recommend that we capture that strong language there on item 2 and swap out offered with shall.
Provide.
Provide doesn't mean that a board member will go through that training. And
Right. I like
that'd be
membership.
my recommendation, to capture the language out of the statute.
So shall be provided, or,
A
Member shall
member
receive.
shall
Shall do it.
receive,
okay.
shall go through that training, however you
Or
want to
shall
word that.
attend, yeah.
Shall receive.
Yeah, and
attend.
the way, I remember looking at this with MSBA, because at 212,
There's statute in front of
thank you. I just pulled it up. Oh, that's out of 123B09. Okay, that's why. I was looking at 127A19, which is financial management. And MSBA actually calls out MSBA, and I felt that was inappropriate, so I did take that out. Will be provided the opportunity and encouragement. School board training shall receive. Yeah, so consistent with 127A19, that, I hate to put Director Friedman back on the spot here, but we have a statutory inconsistency. So 123B09 states a member shall receive training in school finance and management developed in consultation with MSBA and consistent with section 127A19. So when we go to 127A19, it states the Department of Education shall make available, and then it talks about the specifics of the training.
Yeah, there's parallel there in my view, making available through MDE, with the statute also calling for a requirement to have that training. I think they can be seen as compatible.
I see the second one that you mentioned as a pathway of receiving it, that MDE would make it available.
Okay.
The School Boards Association makes it available too. I think the statute, from my reading of it, says that to a certain extent, it doesn't matter where you get it, as long as you get it somewhere, that you shall receive this training.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we remove the word
That's the
offered,
important part.
and it simply states, new school board members will be provided with the following, section 2, training in school finance and management consistent with Minnesota statute, that would be sufficient.
Again, providing the training doesn't require the training.
Shall receive.
Mm.
Shall participate.
Shall complete training.
There you go,
Complete,
there's-
attend.
Well, because the training could be a document or presentation or, I mean, so receiving it could be in different forms.
I think we got to pull item 2 out of the shall be provided with if we're going to make it a requirement then. So pull, maybe make it like a B or C or even E.
Yeah, you can make it a separate item.
Pull out as a separate item.
How long do we get to do that one?
180.
I haven't made it that.
Statute says 180 days.
Okay.
180 days, so approximately 6 months. Yeah, and MSBA. Oh, okay. This is where it gets confusing. So MSBA in their model policy states that you will be provided the opportunity and encouragement to attend orientation and training sessions sponsored by MSBA. And then it adds a second sentence that states, school board members shall receive training in school finance and management. So we can pull that out and add it as another line item.
I had another question too. Is there also, when you are a school board officer, is there extra training associated with that?
It's
If you're
offered.
an officer?
MSBA does offer officer training.
But is that an offered or a shall?
The only thing called out in
It's not in
statute,
statute.
from my purview of it, is the financial and management training.
Okay,
For
As
every
required.
board member.
Yeah,
For all board
that's my
members.
understanding as
okay.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it said the word finance, I didn't know if you're, like the treasurer or something, if there was something extra that you
There
had to do as
is.
a.
There is, and any board member can, that MSBA does offer. They offer chair training, treasurer
officer,
training.
yeah.
And
Right.
clerk training.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you can sign up for any of those, whether you're in those roles or not.
Okay. I just wanted a clarification that.
But the only thing in statute is what the superintendent
Correct.
brought forward
Yes.
about the finance.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so I think it's value, I think there is value in pulling that out and making a separate item, more in line with the MSBA model policy.
I would agree.
I would agree too.
Okay, I made a note to do that as well. Anything else on 1212?
So on item D in the same section 2,
Yes.
the reimbursement of necessary expenses for attending meetings and conventions pertaining to school activities. So I have plenty of PTO at work, so I could take off without considering whether it impacts my income from my work. How does that work when it impacts, somebody has to take a day off and they don't have PTO at their work? Would that be reimbursed?
You just opened a can of worms, which is okay. We have an existing policy 103B that covers this for school board members. I have a note for when we, 103B only covers
Travel.
103B covers out-of-state travel.
Travel.
It's 103A, and I probably referred to that incorrectly 100 times. 103A handles school board member reimbursement guidelines. My proposal with this new batch of policies is that we retain 103A when we adopt the 1100 and 1200 series until we get to the 400 series, because MSBA model policy 412 is what covers reimbursement, and they look at board members, were covered under employees as part of 412. So there's a cross-reference there. So my proposal was going to be that we retain 103A until probably next school year sometime when we read-write 412. So that would be a referential point in this policy. Does that answer your question?
No.
So typically, the policy reads that there's a full day and a half day conference, and that's how we're reimbursed.
Yeah, so we
For your
have-
time.
Yes, for your time at a conference.
Yeah,
Right.
so in
Is that
103A
what you
right
mean?
now, we cover some travel, mileage inside and outside the district, coverage at the mileage rate approved in School Board Policy 302. And then we have reimbursement for airfare. There's a whole section in here on airfare travel credit. There's lodging, there's per diem for meals, registration fees, cab fare, et cetera. And then conferences, this is all in 103A, for things like, and this is how outdated our policies are, we have C in here. ECSU, MSBA, and other educational organizations, different task forces, and then we have a reimbursement, which might get to your requesting time off. $75 for attendance at a half-day meeting, or $150 for attendance at a full-day meeting, and I believe that's what Member Tyson was referring to. And
But nothing would ever cover wages.
No, you don't get a wage reimbursement.
Right.
No.
It's the stipend in lieu of,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's a vacation day, you're being paid for that. PTO, you're being paid for that at work, and then the stipend
Yep.
would be additional.
Right, so it's the people who don't have the PTO would be impacted by having to take a day off,
Unpaid day.
unpaid,
Yeah.
yep.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and
Or
my,
half day.
my current recommendation on this, unless the board wants to go another direction with this, is that we would address that when we look at policy 412.
Sure.
Which would then replace 103A. We'll just keep 103A around for now until we get to 412. That was kind of my thought on that. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, that brings us to 1213. This is on committees. And this was candidly the one I expected to have the most conversation around, because I do have a proposal for committees. It's not in the document as presented, because when I wrote this, I do have 3A, number 3, Communications Committee. I was going to propose that we strike communications. It would start next September. And Dr. Freeman's going to be very happy with me again, because I was going to suggest that we extend policy to the full 2 hours prior to board meetings, so that they can spend an hour working on the policy maintenance work, and then another hour working on all of these MSBA rewrites that we're working on here, because from this point out, there are very few policies that won't need to go through policy committee. We have a 300 series that we at the board can probably do ourselves, because it works primarily with Dr. Massey's responsibility, or how we look at superintendent vacancies, how we would end up replacing a superintendent. But past that, once we get into the 400 series, 500 series, all the way through 900, we're getting into student policies, we're getting into staff policies, we're getting into kind of the nuts and bolts, where we really need a committee looking at that and helping us do that work and merging our existing policy with MSBA model. We even have some community ed policies in there, and I would hate to lose all the work that Director McKinnon's done on some of the policies recently. So that was going to be my suggestion for committees.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Tyson.
Member Chair, I believe what we talked about when we discussed communications was more around adding something as well, like maybe the community ed meeting was brought up to meet. I think just striking communications would be not a good idea in our district our size. I think a lot of important work goes on, as we heard tonight, and I've been on it many times in the past. It's a lot of reorganization of our advertising. We get community input to know, how our messages are being distributed. Also, our district does a huge role in the community ed book, the catalog, because the city doesn't provide any services, so we kind of do that. That falls on us, so we want to be previewing that magazine, that catalog, hearing what's new. And so I just think striking communications, I just don't see that as an option.
So maybe you're thinking expand it.
Or what was your reason for striking it again? I mean, I think you thought that there wasn't enough to fill the hour,
Yeah, I wasn't
is what you told me?
Yeah, and it wasn't, it didn't feel like it was getting the value that it could have been getting. We can still direct administration, or we can still direct the communications team to do certain work for the board. But I do see a value in keeping it around, especially if we can expand the purview. I'd be really interested in Dr. Massey's thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I guess my thought is communications and the evaluation of communications, the development of communication pieces and tools and mechanisms can be done a number of ways. It can be done under the concept of a board committee. There can be a separate committee. The Community Education Committee is currently, advisory committee is outside of the school board committees. The Special Education Advisory Committee is outside of the school board assigned committees. That could be an approach, or, as Member Tyson is indicating, it could stay as is. So again, we're going to do the work, and we're going to gather input from the community and staff to do that work, and the board, and we can do that a number of different ways.
Yep. And that was part of my thought too, was that we do have a number of committees that are not part of the policy-defined standing committees, where they happen every month. I don't know if that's the correct cadence for communications either. I'm certainly open to any ideas on this myself. Member Kirscher?
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking, it's an opportunity, especially now since you've changed it to red line, that the staff members give the update.
Yeah.
I think that's really helpful, and to me, this is a way to hear from our directors. Director Wilson, we don't hear from, but because of the committee is outside, like you said, but it is a good opportunity to hear from the directors. I also served on the communications committee, and we talked a lot about the website, and people were able to give feedback. I heard this, or I heard that, whatever, our school closing policy, or, whatever. It was a free-flowing information back and forth, maybe what you hear out in the community. So I appreciate hearing from the directors at the meetings.
Would there be value in expanding that and having it be communications and community ed?
Yeah, because that has
It
been
could be,
discussed.
sure.
So what are your thoughts on that, Member Christensen? Because I've been on that before.
Yeah.
and
I'm
you're
on
it
the
now.
I'm on the Community Ed Advisory Council, and to me that it certainly could be added. But to me, the Community Ed Advisory Council's the meeting is a little bit different, just because they focus on, like, for example, the last meeting, the new athletic director, he presented, so then you hear all about athletics, and it's been super interesting to hear preschool, the
Right.
director of, or maybe not the director, whatever the word is, Bethany Hardy in charge of preschool. You can hear how they do the screening and what the numbers, it's more in depth than maybe we would get the 1 hour here. I mean, I think you could certainly touch on it. I don't think you'd want only one of those things. I feel like you'd want the community ed meeting here, because in the advisory council, we don't talk about the website or those,
Yeah.
or like school closures, like Renee is in the community one talking about, we send out the caller if school is canceled. So I feel like they do a little bit of a different business. But when Director McKenna comes up here and kind of says what they talk about, I think you could touch about, at the Community Advisory Council, Bethany Hardy spoke about, XYZ or whatever. So I think you could incorporate it. I think, to me, you would still want two separate things, I think, because the Community
two
Advisory
separate
goes more in
functions.
depth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are. What I do like about the thought or the idea about combining that is because I've been on that, and it's a strong group. It's made up of a lot of good community members that continue to be on that, and so they bring a lot of value. So I could see their value kind of being as encompassed in the communications.
Yeah.
But I'd really like to hear what Director McKinnon thinks.
So would I. I see him nodding back there, and I do think that community ed does such a great job of
they
communicating
do.
that maybe there's value to combining them. I don't know. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I first and foremost appreciate the attention that our district gives community education. I was fortunate to have the opportunity just yesterday to present to some aspiring superintendents in Dr. Massey's class and really showcase what community ed is in our district and what it could look like in districts that they may serve in, and how integrated we are. And this is just another example of that. So with that, I thank you. I would agree that the function of the advisory council is different than the board committee work. What I would recommend is that if we were to retain the communications committee, we could bring in a touch of that, and I might have some members that want to serve on that. We're required to meet statutorily 4 times a year, although we meet six times a year. We go
Okay.
above that because it's value. there's
Community
value.
ed advisory.
Advisory
Okay.
council, yep.
Which I would recommend we would keep.
Yeah.
This would be additive.
This would be, okay, so maybe that's what I was wondering, is if you're thinking of either moving that to this. So that group meets 6 times a year. And it's a very motivated group, and what they do is they really provide feedback and input to community ed. Here are your taxpayer dollars combined with fees. Here's what we have ideas for programming, or here's what's working really well. They're really an advisory council to community education. And I would worry that if we broaden that scope too much, we might thin that group out because they're so motivated towards that group or towards that focus there. So if we continue with the communications committee, certainly there's ways to continue to embed what the work of community ed is within that work. That's always on the table though.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, let's not strike communications, let's keep that. Let's not combine it with community ed, and what we have is we have a system that's working well, so let's keep it that way. Would that be correct?
But I do think that we need to look at bringing more people into the communications committee, because I've known that, it's gotten small. So I'd like to see more community
And
involvement.
specifically, community ed representation in that?
Quite possibly, I think one of the
He
reasons why
mentioned
that may be the case, I mean, I brag about our district, I love our district. I believe that overall, our communications process has really come a long way in the last several years, and that's a testament to the work of our team certainly, but Renee Reedy is just, she's an all-star. She's a top 1%er, and with that, I think has maybe tempered things that might bubble up in other districts. And so when that happens, our communications committee might look differently than if we weren't functioning so highly in that regard. But it does become a really good opportunity to process ideas for her, to allow that. So I think right now, from my perspective, it would be trying to rally more folks to come in and provide feedback, use it as a two-way street of communication for folks who go back into the community and bring forth the ideas that we talk about in that committee.
Okay.
And Member Chair, Director McKinnon makes an excellent point. We used to be back in communications committee just tearing our hair out trying to think, how can we have better reach to Linwood and Lino? How can we change our look? How can we, we went through the whole Ranger redoing of our emblems and all. So there has been just a lot of heavy lifting that's gone on in that committee. So
That's not how I lost my hair. That was
Sure?
4 kids.
Well, and I think that's an excellent point, though, because we don't want to fall back behind on that.
Right.
And maybe we are more comfortable with even talking about taking it off the table because of all the good work that's come out of it. And we certainly don't want to lose that either. We don't want to lose traction.
Yeah, sometimes you don't
Well
have a
said.
problem until one's created, and then you're right back to saying maybe
Yeah.
we need a communications committee. So
Yeah.
I would think that we're on the right track right now, but certainly always good to process better ways to look at things, do things, and gather that input especially.
And in a district our size, we really need, it's just crucial that we have strong communications,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so that was only my only point of discussion that I wanted to talk about on this policy, unless somebody has something else.
I have one thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to add, when I was doing some research and just looking at the model policy and looking at ours and looking at some other districts, I noticed in St. Anthony New Brighton added G under procedures for school board committees. And I thought that this kind of resonated with me because on committees we have students, we have community members, board members. So anyway, I'm going to read the language and you can see what you think.
Sure.
It says, committees will not stray into management and do not oversee or direct staff and do not have authority to direct school district staff to take any specific actions or duties. Only administration or the full school board may direct school district staff. And I thought that has a lot of value in just kind of knowing what the work is and how that can be handled before people even come on committees by reading that in the policy. So I apologize, I don't have copies for everybody, but can certainly send it to the board chair and to all of you to read it for yourself. But I would like language like that added. I think it's important.
Well, item 2D basically says that a committee or subcommittee is advisory in nature
All right.
and has only such authority as specified by the school board.
But I think pointing it out in policy that, you know, people on the committee cannot be directing school staff, district staff.
Maybe you could add something like that to D, just,
Yeah, combine them.
Yeah.
you know, something about not directing
I will make a
administration, or,
note.
Yeah.
you know, I don't know, something along those lines.
Just putting it in with, I mean, it would fit in D.
It would fit there,
It
yeah.
would, it would fit well in D.
I thought of that,
Would
too.
would you send me that text?
Sure.
I made a note to add that, because I don't see any downside to strengthening that and making it
Okay.
just,
4C
Very.
also says the power of the committees or subcommittees of the school board is advisory only and is limited to making recommendations to the board.
Yeah, but this specifically talks about directing staff.
Mhm.
But I like the idea of combining it in one that was already there.
yeah, maybe it would go in 4C a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. number
I just
correction.
had one thing. Under 3C, where it says the school board will establish by resolution for each standing or ad hoc committee the number of members. And I'm just wondering, you know, sometimes a community member might drop off
Mhm.
or, you know, I mean, are we, is that any kind of issue? What if we're supposed to have 6 and we only have 4 or something? Or do we need to say that the number of members, or, because it says established by resolution, the number of members. I'm just wondering if that kind of
Yeah.
hamstrings us if something is changing, or,
That's out of MSBA
Oh, okay.
model,
That's
so I'm not,
from-
I'm not married to it at all.
it's just a small point. I don't, you know,
And-
I
and
don't
I-
feel super strongly about it. I'm just wondering, you know, if that,
I guess I would have a question for Dr. Massey here. In the past, when the board has done an ad hoc committee and they've directed that through resolution, how specific have they been? Have they said, kind of figure it out on your own, or?
That's generally been the approach.
okay.
You try to get a representative committee, not being tied to the number on the committee, but really driven by trying to be representative. If it's a committee addressing things impacting elementary schools, you get representation across the elementary schools, et cetera.
Okay. Well, that's fine then. I just,
Well, perhaps there could be a minimum number as opposed to saying what the number is.
Yeah,
well, it would probably depend. Is it a big, like you, Dr. Massey just said, is it relating to the elementary schools? Then you would want a big cross-section. The minimum might be
Yeah.
20 or something. And maybe on the communications committee, there's only 5 people or something. So so the minimum might be hard to do. I think that's fine if you just sort of said, like, in general, what the number of the members were. I didn't know if it said somewhere, you have to have 10 or whatever. I think if it just makes sense to leave it as member, that's just fine.
okay. Yeah, and we've been fortunate too that a lot of times it's not the board saying, hey, we need a committee to go out and look at elementary school borders. Our administration team just knows that's the right thing to do. And they
Right.
come to us and they say, hey, we're going to put a committee together, and we just accept that.
Yeah,
So that's how I think, I feel like a lot of our ad hoc committees come more out of administration than come from board directives.
True.
And then the school board members are a 1-year term, but I'm not seeing anywhere where a term is, and I don't see a document, the charge or mission of each such committee. I haven't seen those documents.
In our case, right at the moment, we don't have any ad hoc committees that are
We don't
board
have-
directed.
Well, it's
Yeah.
committees or the standing or ad hoc, for each standing or ad hoc committee. Number of members, the term, and the charge or mission of each
Yeah,
subcommittee,
we
or
have-
of each such committee, rather.
Yeah, we haven't been that verbose in our current standing committees either.
So we would have to whip up those documents. and numbers.
So member Christensen, were you wanting a number in there?
No, I didn't, no, I just, it was a question, it was
Okay,
a
it was more
clarifying
a
question,
question,
thank you.
okay.
Yeah, I just,
Okay.
just a clarifying question.
Well, it might be a good idea to have it in a at least number. So why have a committee if there's two? So.
Right.
And in the instance that Member Christensen said, if we were to have a elementary school, perhaps we'd want two from each school, minimum.
And if, maybe I could offer,
Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
had these committees for a long time, and they've served the district really well. Sometimes less is more in policy, because if you say 10, then, and you don't have 10, you need to get 10. And 8 might be sufficient. So, I mean, it's the prerogative of the board again, but sometimes less is more. And when you state things in policy, then
Right.
you got to do what's in policy. And these policies, this policy has served us well, and these committees have served us well with the current language that we have in policy.
Right, so.
You said that much more eloquently than I did, actually. Thank
so
you.
I had time to
that-
think about it.
That's what I was,
That sums
that's
it
what
up
I was driving
perfectly.
at, so thank you.
That's
Based on
perfect.
that comment,
I don't want a number.
are we comfortable just striking letter C out entirely? We always have the option to have a resolution and stand up a committee, an ad hoc committee, tweak the policy.
I would be fine to just leave it in its original form, if that's what you don't want it just said the word members. I'd be fine to just leave it that way.
Yeah, I would just take this second 2 lines out. So just keep in, the school board will establish by resolution each standing or ad hoc committee. And take
Leave it
out
at
the
that.
4 before each, and then take out the minimum number of members, the term, except for perhaps, since we're doing 1 year, so maybe the school board members would have a term, but
I would actually change that and just say the school board will establish by resolution each ad hoc committee, because we've already defined our standing committees
Right.
in policy.
Mhm.
sure. yeah.
So,
Design may include number of whatever, but like you
Yeah,
said,
that-
just leave it open.
yeah,
That can be its open, yeah.
I like that. I think that's, gives us the flexibility we want while still giving us the
Something to lean on.
the definition to lean on, yeah.
You know, I do think it would be helpful for folks who would want to contact a committee member, that they would know who the committee members are. They can find out board members on committees, but maybe a neighbor is on a committee that somebody wants to give an idea to, but they don't know that they're on the committee. How do they know who to contact?
For board members, that's spelled out.
Yes.
In section D there, since it's a chair appointment. For community members, though, that's an interesting thought, because
Yeah.
some community members may not want their name
Right.
published as a
Right.
part of the
That-
committee.
That could be a,
So I would hesitate to put that in
Privacy.
policy.
Well,
But,
it's an
uh,
open meeting though, so how was that private then?
Yeah, I do see that point as well.
do we have any personal names in any policies?
Personal names in policy?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-mm.
I haven't seen
No,
that
so
in the policies
why
at
don't-
all.
Yeah, no,
No.
so.
No, and I don't believe that we publish.
So then they
No.
would just have to come to the committee
Yeah.
meeting.
Mhm.
And the specific director facilitating those committees on the standing committees is posted, and that's a point of contact for community members too.
Yep. Yeah, and that is in policy, the facilitator of each of the standing committees.
Yeah, and that's usually how we connect people
Yeah.
that want to be on committees.
Yeah, those are not, and to Member Tyson's point, those are not called out by name, those are called out by
Position.
title,
Yes.
Right.
position. Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, that gets us through 12-13. We can go to 12-14, which is out-of-state travel. Oh, yes, this is the one that is required by statute. So I don't believe there's a whole lot of, oh, this is 103B. This is the one I keep going back and forth on. Oh, yes, so 103B, we have added language from MSBA model on how to handle frequent flyer miles. I could be totally ignorant, I don't know how much of a problem that is, but then again, I don't know the history of why that's there. So if we feel like we need to add that, I'm not opposed to it at all. Director Friedman?
Statute says so.
Oh,
Less frequent flyer miles.
it does.
Yeah, that's,
Why is that not in the model policy then? Oh, is it because it's part of 412?
Yeah, but I'm not sure which one it's in right off the
Yeah.
top of my head.
We have it in 103B currently, section 5.
mhm.
Okay, so we would need to add that. 103B, section 5. Oh, that's the airline travel credit piece?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll make a note to add that language. My guess is MSBA has it in their 412, so it could become repetitive once we adopt that, but, okay. Comment on that.
I'm looking at model policy 412 MSBA, and it is included in their 412.
Oh, it is in 412. Okay, and that's why I missed it. Okay. Make a quick comment on that. Okay. I got a note on that. Any other comments on 1214? It's not a fun policy, so.
I have nothing.
All right, I think that brings us to adjournment. I entertain a motion.
So moved?
Second. Motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, we are adjourned.